Hello and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be telling you why the Black Death is the worst plague in history. The current situation is pretty bad, but it's nothing compared to the devastation caused by the Black Death pandemic. The Black Death was a pandemic caused by the bubonic plague. But before we talk about the Black Death pandemic, we need to first talk about the first ever bubonic plague pandemic, which started around the 6th century. Around this time, the Byzantine Empire, the continuation of the Roman Empire, was at its peak of territory, when suddenly, a disease that started in China somehow got to Egypt. Rats and fleas were the animals infected, but they didn't know that. Meanwhile, many ships carrying tons of rats and fleas were sailing to Constantinople, the biggest city at the time. The disease quickly spread like wildfire and even infected the emperor, who actually recovers. Then, many ships kept leaving Constantinople and Egypt, but it's still annoying to them was that the rats and fleas on their ships still had the disease. And so it spread quickly and would kill around 20 to 30% of the world population, with Europe losing 40% of its population. The plague caused economic problems in the Byzantine Empire, and slowly, over a few centuries, caused the downfall of the empire. But now we'll be talking about the Black Death pandemic of the 14th century. Italians were trading in Crimea, and at the same time, Mongol troops were fighting in Crimea. And at the same time as that, there was a plague in the Chinese province, Hubei, and more specifically, Wuhan. And when the Mongols had to travel to Crimea to supply their troops, they unknowingly brought infected rats and fleas to Crimea. The plague quickly devastated Crimea, so the Italians left to go back to Italy. But they had actually brought more of the infected rats and fleas. And so when they arrived in Italy, the rats and fleas carried the disease everywhere, and it spread across the entire continent. And even continents like Asia and Africa were getting hit hard too. And in the year 1351, 4 to 5 years after the start, Europe had lost almost 65% of its population, while in the whole world, estimates range from 75 million to 200 million deaths from this one pandemic. Let's say 75 million is the correct estimate. That would be 16% of the world population at the time. And if the worst case scenario is correct, that would be nearly 42.2% of the world population at the time dying from one pandemic. Some places were so devastated that they didn't regain the same amount of people they had prior to the pandemic until the 1800s. Of course, there were more bubonic plague pandemics. For example, the epidemic in England and the one in France. However, none of those really became a pandemic, which is why we're not going to talk about those. Later in the 19th and 20th century, with the inventions of antibiotics and the discovery that revealed that the rats and fleas were the carriers, the bubonic plague was no longer the Grim Reaper's best friend. Of course, that same plague still exists right now. However, only around 20 people get infected each year, so don't worry. But remember, even though the plague is almost eradicated, this current disease isn't yet, so stay safe. Thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.